There is a door. It has no handle on the outside, no keyhole, no hinges you can see. It sits at the end of a long corridor that stretches 96 years into the past, and every 4 years a team from Africa walks that corridor, sometimes slowly, sometimes at a sprint, sometimes carried by the noise of an entire continent screaming them forward. And they reach the door. And it doesn't open. It has never opened. Not once. Not for Cameroon in 1990. Not for Senegal in 2002. Not for Ghana in 2010, when Asamoah Gyan stood 12 yards from the semi-final and sent a penalty into the night sky. Not for Nigeria. Not for Ivory Coast. Not for Algeria or Tunisia or Egypt. And not for Morocco. Not in 2022, when they became the first African nation in history to reach a World Cup semi-final, and the whole world fell in love with them. And not tonight, in Foxborough, Massachusetts, on a warm July evening in 2026, when they walked down that corridor one more time, knocked again, louder this time, harder this time, and the door stayed shut. 2-0 France. Same as last time. Same opponent. Same scoreline. Same ending. And somewhere in the streets of London, hours later, smoke rose into the sky and riot police pushed back crowds of Moroccan fans who had nowhere to put their grief except the pavement. This is not a football story. Not really. Football is just the language it speaks. This is a story about power and who holds it. About a door that was built a century ago and the country that keeps standing behind it. Let's go back. Not to 2022. Not to 2026. All the way back. To the beginning. When FIFA organized the first World Cup in 1930, Africa didn't exist on football's map. Not because Africans didn't play football. They did, passionately, in the streets of Casablanca, in the fields outside Lagos, on the dirt pitches of Dakar. But in 1930, most of Africa was not free. It was carved into territories controlled by European empires. France controlled Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, and a dozen others. Britain controlled Nigeria, Ghana, Egypt, South Africa. Belgium controlled the Congo. Portugal controlled Mozambique and Angola. Football was brought to Africa by the colonizers. It was taught in colonial schools, played in colonial leagues, governed by colonial rules. And when the World Cup was created, this grand tournament to crown the best football nation on earth, the colonized were not invited. Africa did not send a team to a World Cup until 1934, when Egypt played and lost. The continent did not send a team again until 1970. 40 years of exclusion. 40 years of the world's most popular sport pretending that an entire continent of football-loving people simply did not exist. By the time African nations began appearing regularly at the World Cup in the 1990s, the competition's power structure had been cemented for 60 years. 8 nations had won it, all European or South American. The coaching pipelines, the academy systems, the tactical knowledge, the institutional memory of how to win a 7-game tournament against the best in the world. All of it belonged to the same small circle of countries that had been playing this game at the highest level since before most African nations had independence. Africa arrived at the party 60 years late, and the hosts pretended the doors had always been open. Now here is where the story turns into something stranger, something that feels almost designed by a novelist with a cruel sense of irony. The country that has done more than any other to develop African football talent, the country whose clubs scout African children, whose academies train African teenagers, whose leagues showcase African brilliance every single weekend, is the same country that keeps stopping Africa from winning the World Cup. France. Think about what France's national team actually is. Kylian Mbappe's parents are from Cameroon and Algeria. Ousmane Dembélé's family is from Mauritania and Senegal. Aurélien Tchouameni's roots trace to Cameroon. William Saliba was born in Paris to a Cameroonian mother. Diot Upamecano's family is from Guinea-Bissau. Randall Kolo Muani's parents are from the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is not a footnote. This is the core of the team. France's World Cup squad is, in the most literal genetic sense, substantially African. The talent that powers their attack, anchors their defense, controls their midfield. It flows through a pipeline that begins on the African continent and ends in French football academies. France won the World Cup in 2018 with a squad whose roots stretched across Africa. They reached the final in 2022 with the same formula. And now, in 2026, they are in the semi-finals again, having just eliminated the strongest African team in the tournament, using players whose bloodlines run directly back to the continent they just knocked out. There is a word for a system where the raw material is extracted from one place and the finished product benefits another. There is a word for a pipeline that takes the best of what Africa produces and redirects it into European glory. And that word has been sitting uncomfortably at the center of this conversation for a very long time. Morocco knows this story better than anyone. 6 players in Morocco's 2026 World Cup squad were born in France. They grew up speaking French. They went to French schools. Some of them played in French youth academies, trained by French coaches, surrounded by French teammates. And at some point, each of them made a choice. Not France. Morocco. The flag their parents raised them under, not the one printed on their passport. Achraf Hakimi was born in Madrid to Moroccan parents. He could have played for Spain. He chose Morocco. Azzedine Ounahi was born in Casablanca but moved to France as a teenager. He plays his club football in Europe, but wears the Moroccan shirt with a ferocity that goes beyond professional obligation. These are men caught between 2 identities, and they chose the one that needed them more. And tonight, in Foxborough, they lined up against France, a team that, in another life, some of them could have played for. And they lost. Again. Morocco did not register a single shot on target until the 84th minute. France controlled the game from the opening whistle. Mbappé scored his 8th goal of the tournament, tying Messi at the top of the Golden Boot charts. Dembélé added the 2nd. The scoreline was identical to 2022. The result was identical to 2022. And the feeling afterward, that gut-deep, airless, suffocating feeling of having given everything and still not being enough, was identical too. Morocco's coach said afterward that his team would come back stronger. He said the same thing 4 years ago. And the terrifying thing is, he's right. They will come back stronger. Morocco's trajectory is genuinely upward. They are the first African team to reach the knockout rounds in back-to-back World Cups. They are ranked 6th in the world. Their squad is deep, talented, experienced. They are better now than they have ever been. And it still wasn't enough. Here's the question that haunts this story. The one that sits underneath every statistic, every tactical breakdown, every column inch written about Africa's World Cup drought. Is it possible to overcome a 60-year head start? Because that's what we're really asking. When people say Africa hasn't produced a World Cup winner because of inferior coaching or weaker domestic leagues or less depth in the squad, what they're actually describing are the symptoms of a system that was built without Africa in mind. The coaching infrastructure is weaker because nobody invested in it for 60 years. The domestic leagues are weaker because the best players leave for Europe as teenagers. The depth is shallower because the pathway from talented child to World Cup-ready professional runs through Paris and London and Madrid, not through Casablanca or Lagos or Accra. The talent is there. It has always been there. Africa produces some of the most gifted football players the world has ever seen. But the system is designed, not through conspiracy, but through decades of accumulated advantage, to funnel that talent upward into European football, where it wins trophies for European clubs, and increasingly, for European national teams. France understood this before anyone else. Their academy system, pioneered at Clairefontaine in the 1980s, was explicitly built to identify and develop talent from immigrant communities, many of them African. The result is a national team that plays with the athleticism, the creativity, the raw explosive power of African football, but within a European tactical framework, backed by European infrastructure, wearing a European shirt. Morocco look across the pitch at France and they see, in the most painful way possible, what their own talent looks like when it's housed inside a system that has had a century to perfect itself. Ghana, 2010. World Cup quarterfinal against Uruguay. Stoppage time. Dominic Adiaya heads the ball toward goal. Luis Suarez, standing on the line, punches it away with both hands. Red card. Penalty. The entire African continent holding its breath. One kick from the semifinal. Asamoah Gyan steps up. He hits the crossbar. Ghana lose the penalty shootout. Africa's best chance at a semifinal, until Morocco in 2022, dies on the crossbar at Soccer City in Johannesburg, on African soil, in front of African fans, in the African World Cup. Cameroon, 1990. Roger Milla, 38 years old, dancing at the corner flag, dragging his nation to the quarterfinals, where England beat them in extra time. Senegal, 2002. They beat France, the defending champions, in the opening game. The entire world lost its mind. And then they lost in the quarterfinals to Turkey. On a golden goal. In extra time. Every time. The quarterfinal. The semifinal. The last stretch before the summit. African teams reach it with brilliance, with passion, with moments of pure magic that make the whole world fall in love with them. And then they hit the wall. The wall made of deeper squads, better funded systems, decades of institutional experience, and the quiet, compounding advantage of having been at the top of this sport since before Africa was allowed to compete. Morocco has now hit that wall twice. Both times it was painted blue. Both times the man who broke through it was Kylian Mbappé, the son of a Cameroonian father, raised in a Parisian suburb, trained by French coaches, wearing a French shirt. The cruelty of that image writes itself. After the final whistle tonight, a woman was interviewed outside the stadium. Moroccan flag draped over her shoulders, tears on her face. She said something that stopped me completely. "I'm happy. I'm Moroccan, but I live in France. I love both countries." That's the sentence that holds this entire story. Because it's not about hatred. It's not about villainy. France is not the enemy. France is family. France is the country that educated half of Morocco's players, that shares a language, a cuisine, a Mediterranean coastline, a history that is painful and intimate and impossible to untangle. And that's what makes it hurt so much more than a loss to Brazil or Germany or any other nation would. When France beats Morocco, it doesn't feel like an outsider slamming the door. It feels like a relative locking it from the inside. 96 years, 23 World Cups, 1 billion people on the African continent, thousands of players, hundreds of games, decades of sacrifice, 0 World Cup winners. And tonight, once again, the last African team standing walked down the corridor, reached the door, and found the same country waiting on the other side. 2-0, same as last time. Morocco will come back. Africa will come back. The talent is too vast, the passion too deep, the dream too old to die. Somewhere right now, in a suburb of Casablanca, or a dusty pitch in Dakar, or a concrete courtyard in Lagos, a kid is kicking a ball against a wall. He doesn't know about colonial history, or talent pipelines, or 60-year head starts. He just knows that one day he wants to play in a World Cup. And one day, maybe not in 2030, maybe not in 2034, but one day, that kid, or the kid after him, or the kid after that, is going to walk down that corridor, reach the door, and kick it off its hinges. But not tonight. Tonight the door stayed shut. The door.